I'm very excited to be here. This is, an excellent opportunity to chat on Earth Day. I admire what you're doing, so I'm excited
Thank
to
you.
get into it.
And I think all of us here admire what you're doing as well. You're taking an industry that has been the same for a while and completely turning it on its head and finding a whole new way of working. So, but first of all, indeed, happy Earth Day.
Likewise,
Are you doing anything special today other than this Instagram Live?
Not really. Working like usual, and really excited to be chatting with you today about this. Happy to be here.
Awesome, cool. Well, we're all very glad that you're here as well. We have a very global audience. I always ask where people are joining from. We have people from North and South America, Africa, Middle East, Europe. So we have a lot of people who are ready to hear about the amazing work you're doing. The way I like to start these conversations by kicking off with a little fact, and then I'll properly introduce you. And then from there, really, you'll be doing most of the talking. I think everyone is looking forward to. So, did you know plastic pregnancy tests create 2 million pounds of plastic waste just in the US alone each year? That's crazy. That's just the US. So today, I'm speaking with Bethany Edwards. As everyone knows, she's the co-founder and CEO of Lia Diagnostics, who saw this challenge and decided to do something about it. So Lia Diagnostics is changing the pregnancy test industry by re-engineering the at-home pregnancy test into something that is good for both women and the earth. The test is made entirely of paper, so it's flushable and biodegradable, which also means it's discreet. And Lia has won all sorts of awards, including Time Magazine's Best Inventions, Fast Company's World-Changing Ideas in the Health category, and the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year. That's just to name quite literally a few. There are many more. So, Bethany, I'm really looking forward to hearing all about it. And thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you for having me. Like I said, I'm really excited to be here. I admire everything that you're doing as well.
Oh, thank you. And we have a very global audience, as I mentioned, but where are you taking the call from?
Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very nice. I've never been, but I've heard it's a really cool city. So today I'd really like to cover 3 things. Number 1 is that moment when you really realize this is what you want to do. From there, we'll go on to what is Lia Diagnostics and why is it so sustainable? And third, what can we all do to be more environmentally friendly, especially considering today is Earth Day. So how does that sound?
It's great. Happy
Awesome.
to jump in.
Cool. And for everyone who's listening and joining and watching, please feel free to share your comments and questions. I'm going to be monitoring the chat, so it's a great opportunity to ask Bethany anything you want to know. So that's enough for me. I've done plenty of talking. So over to you, Bethany. What was that moment really when you realized Lia Diagnostics is what you want to do?
Yeah. I've always felt a passionate relationship between a woman and her health, and then it should be sacred and private, and that's always kind of been really part of me. The other piece is that I grew up in a greenhouse, an underground house that was built into a hill. So I think from early on, I had this unique relationship with nature, with designing and engineering, and that's just been ingrained in me from such an early age, as well as the idea that the world holds a special regard for those who challenge the status quo. I can remember whenever I was younger telling people that I would sled ride off my roof. And, that's just such a counterintuitive thing. But having been able to grow up in a house that was designed into a countryside hill, we were able to do that. But those challenges and that unique kind of design perspective has always been with me. And then I think the moment that it really hit me was I read this article by Richard Fry from the Industrial Design Society from America. And he said that we should be designing products not to be recycled, but to be designed in a way that they should be disposable, that they should be designed to completely disappear. And this idea of designing so that the products can go right back into nature was what really kind of kind of struck me. And at the time, I was at the University of Pennsylvania working on my master's degree in integrated product design. And so that just it changed the way that I thought about products, product design, and commercialization, and I really became very deeply inspired by the idea of temporality. And with single-use diagnostics, they're only used for a few minutes, but everything that they're made out of, plastics, nitrocellulose, glass fibers, none of these things biodegrade at all, right? And nobody's innovated in the form factor in over 30 years for pregnancy tests. So that means, if you were born in the 1980s, your mom's plastic pregnancy test is somewhere in a landfill. And so there was such a unique opportunity to take new innovations in materials, and be able to bring them into this consumer packaged, over-the-counter kind of product. And then to be able to overlay that with the unmet needs around privacy was the other really big thing that we set out to do. So not only making something sustainable in this category, but also providing women with the benefit of privacy. 92% of women value privacy whenever they're testing. And so to be able to solve both of those things by eliminating plastic and by creating something that is paper-based, that really became the insight and the inspiration for the entire design and the product of the company.
That's really cool. I think it's amazing to hear that you basically, sustainability, green, that's quite literally how you grew up. And I think the fact that you grew up in basically like a house in a hill.
Yeah.
First of all, it sounds amazing. Second of all,
you know what? I actually have a picture. You want to see it?
Yes, please. I think we all want to see it. Oh, wow.
Yeah. So,
It's
so my
like
dad, right? So
I was kind of picturing a hobbit.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's kind of a hobbit. It's kind of a hobbit house. My dad built bridges for a living, and so he used that inspiration to be able to build that house. But yes, that's where I grew up.
So awesome. Do they still live there?
Yeah, yeah. So just a unique childhood of being inspired by nature, all things green and natural, and being inspired by engineering and creativity, and sort of just STEAM and STEM has been really just a part of my life since I was really young.
It's really interesting. The other part, moving away from the incredible house, which I could probably geek out over for far too long. That point about Richard Fry and how products should be disposable. When you first said that, I have to admit it was a little bit shocking, because we're actually thinking, I think the sort of normal way of thinking in the green community, if we can kind of say conventional thinking, is that products shouldn't be disposable. You should find ways to reuse and recycle is kind of far down the list, but you certainly don't want to throw things away. So it's kind of interesting to hear that it's that actually the whole point is that it should be disposable. But I suppose the point is that it's actually similar to the quote that I posted earlier today, where nature wastes nothing. So we kind of need to mimic nature in that sense, like when leaves on a tree are designed to be disposable, and then actually it feeds the tree, which is the genius of it all.
Yeah, we should be taking so much inspiration from nature. I think some of your other questions go into who do I admire on the sustainability side. I really admire what's being done around the Biomimicry Institute. I mean, and with Lia, I mean, all of the materials and the way that we designed it and the manufacturing processes, in order to make something that's going to be biodegradable and also water dispersible, you really need to work with materials that nature already provides. And so it's either a plant, a mineral, or a protein that you have to kind of embed in the overall design and engineering process. Because if you can use the ingredients from nature to go right back into nature, that's just so powerful. And I think it gets into this area where nature can profit from nature. And I think that's really just a really powerful place to be in. And I mean, we're seeing it with, some of these other startup companies that are so materials science driven, with Spinova and AlgaeKnit and Bolt Threads, and there's so much richness in material science that if we can learn to apply those things to everyday items and work within this idea of temporality, it's so powerful. It really is.
So what, if we just kind of take a step back and kind of go through that history? You mentioned pregnancy tests from the 1980s, it still exists. So if we just kind of lay the foundation. So the conventional at-home pregnancy test, what is that like, and what has it been like for the last 30
Mm-hmm.
years?
Yeah, plastics. Lots and lots of plastics. So my bag of plastic pregnancy tests.
Show not yeah, show and tell rather.
Right. Lots of plastics. As we mentioned, like 2 million pounds of plastic are generated from pregnancy tests in the US alone each year. So that's not even getting to the global market.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 million pounds is enough to stretch from here to the International Space Station and back about 7 times if you
Wow.
stack it all up. And the US really only makes up about 30, 35, maybe 40% of all of the pregnancy test market. So it's only a fraction of really the rest of the entire global industry as it relates to pregnancy tests. And that doesn't even cover single-use diagnostic tests, but just pregnancy tests. So lots of plastic, and then digital components. That has been the other innovation, which really, really complicates any kind of recycling efforts, adds obviously a lot more waste to the equation. I mean, nobody's recycling plastic pregnancy tests. You can't, right? It's one of those things where everybody talks about like wish cycling or whatever. I mean, like it's full of synthetic fibers. I mean, there's no real way to recycle them. And so it's a lot of plastic, and it's been the same stick, the same form factor for, like we mentioned, over 30 years. And Lia does not use any of the plastic. It's inspired by nature. It's paper based.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And just on that point of the only innovation in the last 30 years that has really happened is that they basically put a little computer inside of it,
Mm-hmm.
which,
Yeah.
yeah, as you said, it's so much more complicated to recycle a little computer, not to mention to create all of that. It's a little battery, it's a little, there's going to be some sort of microchip. I mean, I don't actually know what goes into it, but
Oh,
there's a
well,
lot of stuff.
I have one here, sort of pulled apart. If we wanna do a little look at it, um,
Oh, wow.
right? I mean, there's a whole LCD like screen, right? I mean, some of the processing power in these were probably comparable to some of the really old computers,
Yeah.
which is also fascinating, right? Because in the 1980s, the other things that were invented with the plastic pregnancy test were the boombox and the first cell phone. Think
Wow.
about how far we've come in those categories, in those innovations, while it's still the same plastic stick on the pregnancy test side. I mean, that's kind of mind blowing. It tells us where some of the dollars and some of the investment is going as well. It's fascinating.
Yeah, that's incredible. And so now it's time for the at-home pregnancy test to have its, I suppose, rebirth. And so what you've done is you've taken that idea of products are meant to be disposable, nature can profit from nature, and you're basically creating an entirely new test which actually does disappear.
Mm-hmm.
And so what does that, so first of all, what actually, you mentioned the word paper, so what's it actually made from? Is it
Yeah.
like quite literally just paper?
Yeah. So I'll do a little demo and we can kind of
Yes,
get
please.
into it. I'll take you through it. So this is what it looks like. Super thin. You use it like an existing test, you pee here, you lay it flat, and then you wait for your results. And it's, one line is a negative, and then 2 lines is a positive. So in that sense, it works like existing pregnancy tests. And some of the genius is around a couple different areas, one of them being the proprietary coatings that we've developed on the housing units. So the top piece and the back piece. So this material is cellulosic, right? So it's paper-based, but it's got some unique fiber weaves. So the fibers are a little bit looser, and that allows it to separate in water, and it allows it to also meet all of the biodegradability third-party testing requirements. Additionally, the design with the perimeter seal is pretty unique because it holds it together without, a bunch of glue or unnecessary kind of additional additives. And then there's a bunch of perforations, really subtle perforations that are put into the design of the test throughout to allow access points for water, for, soil, etc. And yeah, I mean, it's really operating within this kind of unique 5 to 15-minute window where if a liquid lands kind of on the coating, it kind of repels it for a short period of time, and then after a while that coating naturally starts to dissolve and allow the liquid to kind of go into the fibers to break it apart and meet the guidelines. And in normal tests, the chemistry kind of component that runs through a lateral flow diagnostic test would be on plastic substrates. And again, ours is still designed in a way where it's taking advantage of cellulosic fibers as opposed to other types of fibers. Yeah. Oh, and then this is one of my favorites. This is what's left of the Lia pregnancy test after 8 weeks in soil.
Oh, wow.
And so there's not a whole lot there. And then by 10, we have the 100% biodegradability claim, and it's biodegraded significantly faster than the control substance, which was organic cotton. Yeah, and it's been kind of a labor of love in the development of figuring out the unique coding elements that need to be applied, to figuring out and scaling the manufacturing. Because I think one of the things that's really interesting about designing in this way is that it's designed to naturally break down in a natural environment. But how do you control the manufacturing when you have the elements that you're exposed to, right? I mean, it's meant to break down with water, but that also means, what happens if it's humid out? So there's some really interesting design and tension points whenever you're operating within this space, and it's kind of the keys to designing this way and to designing in this kind of temporary go back into nature kind of new age way. I mean, I think it's the onset of a new industrial revolution that's really fueled by materials science and bio manufacturing and these things that have always been at our disposal, but we haven't quite learned how to harness.
Well, it's really cool. I mean, there's so many inventions where you hear how the founder or the inventor of some product or some idea or invention. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but they say, I was sitting in a park and I was watching how a bird flies, or I was watching how leaves do this, that, or the other, and I realized that actually we can do that exact same thing, and and then this whole new product was created. And so I think it's amazing to take inspiration from nature. And I'm curious to know, was that a part of how you actually came up with this? Did you actually look to nature to find some of the solutions to the challenges that you outlined just now?
Yeah, it's a great question. Like I mentioned, kind of in order to design products in this kind of way, you have to be very choosy about the materials that you're working with. And so a lot of it starts from understanding that you're going to be working within a confined set of criteria and a confined set of materials. And so, you know, cellulose seems like a really great natural fit. You know, there has been work that has been done on diagnostics with kind of paper microfluidics, but in the paper microfluidic space, they were using waxes, or they were really small. They weren't midstream based. You know, wax obviously doesn't dissolve in water, and so that couldn't be an ingredient that we would use if we wanted to make a water dispersible biodegradable diagnostic. And in order to get it to a point where it was a midstream device where you could actually, you know, urinate on it and allow it to hold up in use, that also required, you know, kind of unique, different sort of manufacturing and engineering technologies to kind of solve on the coding side. But yeah, I mean, it really was about, if we wanted to do these certain things to biodegrade, if we wanted to disperse in water, then we're working within a very select group of materials to be able to even design for that. So that's kind of the way that we started, and the way that we approached it was really about, if we wanted to do a certain thing, then we have to be very selective about the materials that we're using.
Yeah, that makes sense. On a slightly different topic, how accurate is it? I mean, compared to the standard test?
Yeah, so we've got our FDA clearance. We had to go through all of the FDA studies. And so we are as accurate as other tests on the day of your missed period, which puts us at the over 99% accurate, like other folks. So we had to do all the FDA stuff.
Was that quite a
Um,
process?
it was. In manufacturing, I mean, scaling manufacturing has been quite a process too. You know, I think one of the things that we sometimes don't think about or talk about is the fact that, you know, when you're creating these new biodegradable, sustainable products, it really requires completely disrupting the old manufacturing and supply chains. So that means that we've had to develop all of our own manufacturing techniques from scratch, right?
Wow.
And and there's a lot that goes into that. And I think that, you know, when you're scaling these, and when there's new innovations that start to come on, you know, become commercialized, sustainability and scalability are sometimes at odds. And that's something that we sometimes don't talk about or don't think about. You know, Bakelite, the first you know, true synthetic plastic, has had, you know, hundreds of years in existence. So we've had all those learnings, and so there's some really interesting tension and scalability points and diffusion of innovation that really starts to come into play with some of these products and these materials. I mean, but I will say that we've really dedicated ourselves to try to make this affordable, to everyone, and to kind of the mass public. I think that's important. It's part of our mission. We want to get this into as many women's hands as possible. And so, you know, it is priced very competitively, on par with other existing branded plastic pregnancy tests. But we're offering something that's 0% plastic and you know, sustainable. So we're really dedicated to that mission of trying to make it available to as many people as possible.
I think that's really important because I agree with you that there's a lot of challenges with completely innovating. And I mean, you mentioned, you know, currently, at least with the pregnancy test market, there's really no alternative to plastic. And so manufacturing needs to be completely redone. Those are challenges which it's easy to see why costs go up so quickly. And I think really the important thing is to make it just a standard. It just becomes another option that's not, rather than like, oh, this is some super duper thing and
Mm-hmm.
it's because it's sustainable. It's more like it's sustainable and it's actually at the same price. It's sort of like
Right.
it's just becomes a very easy choice to make at that point.
Exactly. Exactly. The idea of making sustainability simple, I think,
Mhm.
is just so powerful, right? And that's really part of the whole key.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. We do have some questions from the audience, which I'd love to read. So let's see. Vishu VK is asking, what can we do for creating awareness regarding solid waste management and segregation?
Mm, okay.
So
Mm.
I suppose it's a kind of a question about education and really the way I'm seeing this question is um, how can we educate people like, in the context of even Lia Diagnostics, how can we educate people about the importance of um, using biodegradable paper products versus plastic? Unfortunately, I think there is still a long way to go.
Mhm.
So based on your experience, and you mentioned it yourself in terms of educating women and getting your product in the hands of as many women as possible, what would you say is that education process?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is just awareness, right? The ability to have these conversations like we're having, the platform that you've created. I mean, that in and of itself amplifies these stories. I mean, I think a lot of it is just being able to have general awareness and recognition that one, there's a need for it, and two, that there are people that are taking on this challenge, and some of these challenges are hard, and they're really making efforts to kind of solve it. And I mean, I think the other piece of that is, being able to kind of vote a little bit with your dollar, right? I mean, if this is something that people are passionate about, then we're able to design this way and kind of make it simple, like choose paper over plastic. Like, I think there's a lot of power in just even the small steps forward. I mean, you can't create a larger momentum without at least having some baby steps to get there. So even small actions make a big difference. And just talking about it, just having these discussions, having dialogue about it, debate about it. I think that the stuff that even MoMA is doing to bring these conversations to the forefront. What Paolo did with Broken Nature was such a powerful exhibit. The more that there's these kind of conversations out in the public, the more we're able to kind of act on them.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Kind of making it a normal part of conversation and kind of just having that ability to speak about it openly and freely and I think, yeah, just having it in your face makes a big difference. You also mentioned voting with your wallet, which I think is extremely powerful, and it's something that every single one of us can do on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
Voting with your wallet is such an interesting thing because it actually does. This occurred to me as you were just saying that. It does two things. Number one is it supports the company that you're paying or you're giving your money to, number one. And then number two, it's also basically taking money away from someone else. So it's actually doing two things, which is really effective. And yeah, we are all one individual person, but if everyone changes, companies notice very
Mm-hmm.
quickly and they will do everything they possibly can to get you back. So that includes innovating
Mm-hmm.
and changing how things work. Um, Sarah, I'm probably misspelling this. Oh, or mispronouncing. I think it's Sarah V. Goza says or asks or wants to know what your educational background is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mentioned that we developed the research while I was at the University of Pennsylvania, which is where I met the entire co-founding team.
Cool.
It was a cross-disciplinary program, so it was housed in the engineering school, and a third from engineering, a third from design, a third from Wharton, the business school, and then I spent some time in bio. And I think that's really powerful, right? Some of the best innovation is occurring at the intersection of kind of very disparate in different industries. And I think that there's a lot of power in that. So that cross-disciplinary thinking offers a lot of innovation. So that was where I got my master's. Prior to that, I spent 10 years in advertising and marketing.
Wow.
So I'm kind of a technical or creative turned technical founder a little bit. I knew that there was an opportunity, even in the brand space, but I think, advertising really helped me hone not only the brand piece of this, but also the ability to kind of connect dots in different ways and in unique ways. And I saw an opportunity that the next great wave of kind of ad industries was going to involve an industrial design component, because if you're really smart about the way you're designing products in the beginning, you can bake a statement in from the very beginning, right? I mean, the fact that we purposely chose a soft material, that it's cellulosic, that it's white, the design in and of itself says sustainability. It says something about the product, and it inherently creates a brand associated with it. And I think that's really, really powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, we've obviously continued to build off of that then in the packaging. It's a little bit sassier. I don't know if you can see it here. It's got like a little expletive on it. And the only place that it says pregnancy test is on the little tear tab. And when you tear the tear tab, it says, "You got this." And then it says PC Flush, and the over 99% accurate, 0% plastic, 100% your business.
Right.
So, there is a passion in baking that piece into this as well. And just such an appreciation for, really good design and trying to design even the smallest things really well. As well as creativity. I think, leading from a creative standpoint is incredibly powerful. And I think my education, my upbringing in a greenhouse, so to speak, I think contributes a lot to that as well.
That's super cool. It's amazing to hear that actually the program that you were part of with this interdisciplinary, 3-3 or 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 coming from design, engineering, and basically business, it actually worked.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's true.
Did what
I
it
spent time in bio too, so I mean, we were allowed to tap into the other stuff. I learned how to use a pipette while I was there, right? And
Cool.
now I'm like actually pretty good at it. Keep some urine in my fridge.
Yeah, who doesn't need
right?
your fridge?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that I do think that there's a lot of power in kind of the cross-disciplinary, different disciplines coming together. This idea of equal opposites. I mean, if we go back a little bit to the way nature works, if you think about, tides and gravity and protons and neutrons, there's a positive and negative, right? And there's so much power in harnessing kind of the equal opposite of those two, which, to be honest, is something that we took advantage of in this design. It had to have hydrophilic and hydrophobic properties, so repel water, but also absorb. So like those are really interesting to design tension points to really design around.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense if you think about it, because on one hand it has to, and this is actually a question that Miss Uzma is asking about, basically that component of push-pull, I suppose, or opposites attracting to make it work. So she's asking very logistically, does the product function if it gets wet? So let's say you accidentally spill a glass of water because it's just there. Will it still work?
That's a good question. I mean, if you spill an entire glass of water all over it, I mean, it will work. It'll still produce a result, but it's going to be a little soggy, so to speak, right? But from a use case in terms of, urinate here on this area for 5 seconds, it's designed for that. So it's designed to hold up in that kind of use case and perform adequately. Yeah, I mean, it could still theoretically work. It'd be a little soggy though. Right? Because then it's starting to actively break down, which is what it's designed to do, right? If you throw it in the toilet, similar to if you're just dumping an entire glass of water on it, it's going to kind of behave in the same kind of context.
Makes sense. So
I mean,
better
I
not.
hope people aren't really doing that though. I'm not sure. I mean, I guess they could, right? Like just just try dumping water on it for the fun of it. But I mean,
But yeah, I suppose better not, just to be on the safe side. And
yeah.
on that point of biodegradability, um, great question from Sarah again about the time it takes to actually disintegrate or biodegrade. Is there any concern when you flush it down the toilet that it might get stuck in the pipes somehow?
Hmm. All right, good question. So we've done a fair amount of third-party testing around flushability. Believe it or not, there is like an industry leader who has a bunch of toilets in a lab that's accredited, and they run a bunch of different tests. There's like 7 different types of tests. We've passed all of them. There's like a disintegration test, and you have to pass through the pipes test. You have to end up at the end where there's only so much left, and we've done better than several of the leading flushable wipes.
Hmm.
And I will also say that my co-founder, my co-founder had a toilet that we would do studies on in her basement. So we like set up this whole like toilet rig.
Wow.
It's called a parsapati, and so we would do a bunch of testing with putting like water in it and flushing it and like measuring how it reacted. I mean, the design is very slim because of that. And like I mentioned before, the perimeter seal is designed very specifically, kind of just to kind of pierce and hold the fibers together for the period of time that they need, but be able to pull apart. Um, I mean, if you want to, pull it apart, like it's fairly easy to do that. And at that point you're talking about essentially like 2 to 4 squares of toilet paper, right? I mean, once if you choose to do that, it's even it mimics toilet paper in even a more similar way. But we've done testing in whole, tore apart, all different ways. So there's, believe it or not, there's a third party who's dedicated to flushability testing.
Wow. Something for everything.
Yes.
Um, uh, so just a clarification from Miss Uzma about pouring cups of water on the tests. She says her actual question is really about, is there any sort of isolated section for the functional component?
Okay. All right. Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. So, so you do need to, the point is to urinate on the part that is considered the sample collection pad. Just like all pregnancy tests, they have like a sample collection pad that you need to urinate on, and then you lay them flat and you wait for your results. So it works exactly like that in that sense. So I think she's asking, so, if you accidentally peed here, versus here, then it might not work. But with existing tests, it's kind of the same thing, right? If you know, if you pee on the opposite end of where you're supposed to, it's probably not going to actually work. But this part right here, the part that you pee on, does not have the same coating that the rest of the housing unit does. And so it's designed in a way to absorb your urine. So when you pee on it, it absorbs it. It kind of processes it like it needs to with the chemistry, and then it is able to run kind of up the strip of the diagnostic test to give you the result. And in the meantime, this area, the back part of the housing unit, maintains the temporary coating. And so in that sense, the housing unit is temporarily mimicking plastic, and that repels the liquid so that the liquid can be focused on the actual diagnostic test itself.
That makes sense.
I'm thinking that answers
Yeah.
your question a little bit more.
So basically, the way it works, to see if I get it right, and this is the one sort of techie term that I may be able to throw out, and let's see if it actually applies here. So there's the actual pad where the urine goes, and then is that what's called the capillary effect? So actually, it kind of like it's kind of like when you have a piece of paper towel and the corner gets wet, and then the rest of the paper towel. And so what you're doing is, as the liquid goes up, eventually it wants to keep going up, but there's a part where you don't want it to go any further than that, because that's where the chemistry sits. And so it kind of like goes up against that, and it doesn't go any further, and it concentrates in that spot. That's where the lines are.
Yeah, so you're right. You know, that was great. It's at that point it becomes about like fluidic, you know, the way that fluidics work, right? And there's kind of a very specific way the geometry is designed. So we have designed the geometry in a certain fluidic pathway. It also kind of it also has like kind of double pads. So, you know, it pulls it in, it wicks it up. And part of that wicking is also controlled not only by the fibers, but also by the what's called like the absorbent pad at the end. But it's capillary flow and it's fluidics that are really allowing that kind of urine to travel up the diagnostic test strip.
Wow, super cool. So basically, everything about the design is extremely intentional.
It is. It is pretty intentional, and we tried to remove everything that wasn't, you know, that wasn't necessarily needed, right? I mean, we could have chose to, for instance, like make the Lia logo a green, right? But that would have required, you know, extra complexities, etc. So, you know, tried to, yeah, I mean, even the little tear tab, right? I mean, it's trying to just use the materials of the product themselves, as opposed to adding additional materials. It's designed, you know, to be removed, so that there's just additional waste that's not going into the overall design.
It's amazing. So there are a lot of questions here, everyone, and they're fantastic. I just want to make sure that we talk about one aspect of the Lia Diagnostics pregnancy test, which may not be necessarily obvious from the very beginning, and that's the fact that it's discreet. So I really want to make sure that we just have an opportunity to mention that at the very least, and then we can go through the rest of the questions. So can you tell a little bit about that element of it and why that's important and how it works?
Yeah. I mentioned this a little bit before, but you know, 92% of women value privacy when testing, whether they're hopeful negatives or hopeful positives. This is for like a variety of reasons, right? I mean, when we were working on this, we interviewed hundreds of women, we did hundreds of surveys, and you know, we would hear everything from like people wrapping them in tinfoil and disposing them in public dumpsters, taking tests in public restrooms, to, I mean, even somebody who's struggling to get pregnant, right? That constant reminder and seeing a bunch of plastic pregnancy tests pile up in the trash is just like, it's just a heart-wrenching reminder. It's not something that you want to necessarily see on a daily basis. And the pregnancy test itself, I mean, it's an object that elicits a lot of conversation. If it's the first thing that you see on the top of the trash can, somebody's going to ask about it, right? And a lot of times you don't want that, right? Or you don't need that kind of conversation, and it can be coming from multiple different people. And so, you know, a lot of people are then hiding them. They're going to extreme lengths to kind of hide these tests in the trash, or elsewhere. And so the ability to make this so that it's flushable provides that added benefit of privacy. I mean, we've also been really purposeful in the way that we've designed the packaging. There is an ultra discreet version on the website, so you can purchase like one that's completely unbranded. There's no branding on it whatsoever. The pouches that the tests come in, I don't have one sitting next to me, but they're unbranded. They're just white, and they just say "do not bend" on them. There's no branding on them, so we've made an effort to try to embed this privacy piece throughout the design everywhere that we can. Obviously there's certain things that we're required from the FDA to include. We're required to include instructions, but in every other context, we've tried to make an effort to make it as discreet as possible, because we recognize that a lot of people don't want a plastic pregnancy test to be the first thing that you see whenever you open a trash can. And
Yeah.
it's, sometimes it's for extreme reasons, sometimes it's for like simple reasons, like you're just taking a pregnancy test just to check, and you don't really want to have a discussion about it with, your husband or your roommates or
Anyone.
anybody else. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's just, it's a private moment. And I think there's also just an empowerment element in being able to provide women with a version that is discreet and flushable, because you have the opportunity then to kind of share your news your way, right? You can share your joy, you can share your relief, you can keep it private, right? I mean, there's an empowerment element about designing this in a way that allows it to really deliver on the value propositions of privacy.
Yeah, that makes sense. Looking at it from a slightly different from a slightly different angle, lovely lady underscore MMVB says or asks, what if you want to actually save a positive test?
Oh,
How long will the reading/results last?
oh, I like this question. This is a good question. So in the whole, you can share your news and share your joy. Obviously, I'm holding ones here, right? That here's one that contains a, a positive readout. I mean, these are savable if you want to save them, which makes them very nicely scrapbookable. They're super thin, right? And there's the option to kind of scrapbook them, put them in a card if you want, a shadow box, right? Yeah, I mean, there's absolutely the opportunity to keep these if you want to keep them. And the unique thing about this compared to some other existing tests is um, they stay kind of nice, right? So this is a nice. The lighting's a little weird, but this is a nice like positive result. Um, some some other plastic pregnancy tests get really ugly, or the lines disappear, right? They're kind of like really yellowy, or the positive result ends up disappearing. Ours does not. So there is a nice opportunity if you really want to scrapbook it. If scrapbooking is your thing,
Yeah.
totally doable.
And I guess from the point of view of how long it lasts, after all, it basically is just paper. So paper lasts for a while, assuming that you're not throwing it down the toilet or, throwing it in the
Hmm.
garbage or something like that.
Hmm.
But it should, in theory, last for a while if you're, like you said, scrapbooking it or putting it
Yeah,
somewhere safe.
yeah. If you wanna scrapbook it, it could hold up. Yeah.
Cool. So as far as I'm just we'll be wrapping up shortly here. There's one question just about the future of Lia. Prunella the poodle, who's a frequent questioner, is curious about your exit strategy, and
Mhm.
if you think this is going to pave the way for more sustainable FMCGs in healthcare. She also
Mm.
says that she loves what you're doing because she believes it's game changing.
Mm. Well, thank you for that question, and thank you for the support. That is lovely. Um, so I don't know. I might not have spoke about this a ton yet, but the platform and what we've developed here is applicable to other diagnostics. So this works for ovulation tests. It works for urinary tract infection tests. probably some other stuff as well. So if it's a traditional lateral flow diagnostic, it has the ability to work within this context. And I think that's very, very exciting. So obviously there's a mass opportunity in the pregnancy test space and the brand that we're building in women's health around Lia, but this also has even larger, global implications around single-use diagnostic testing. And so, there is a long-term opportunity there to really leverage the intellectual property and the know-how that we've developed in creating this product to additional diagnostic products. Again, it's something from a mission standpoint that we're really passionate about, the idea of eliminating all plastic diagnostic tests. We're obviously focused on pregnancy and focused on Lia, but we believe there's a lot wider, applications and abilities for this. I mean, the other thing is some of these codings and some of the knowledge that we've gathered here could potentially also apply to sustainable packaging. So, there's Lia, the women's health brand, there's the diagnostic opportunity, and there's also learnings from, that could apply to sustainable packaging. So it's layered, it's multidisciplinary. I don't know what her poodle, something or other.
Vanilla.
Oh.
Well, that's cool, and the multidisciplinary part goes back to your roots. So just in the last couple of minutes here, you mentioned at the beginning that the people in biomimicry are individuals that you admire or inspire you. Are there any other sustainable leaders or books or TV shows, movies, anything that you admire that you'd like to recommend to everyone here?
Yeah. So I mentioned the Biomimicry Institute, and Jamie, I believe, is the one who's the founder of that, and her TED Talks are incredible. I'm also a huge fan of evocative design and what's being done with fungi. Mushrooms, I mean, incredible, right?
Yeah.
Really powerful stuff. That's a platform to just build on in and of itself. It's super powerful. Spinova, I mentioned the electrospinning of fibers and the ability to kind of take waste and repurpose it into materials, I think is also really powerful. Bolt threads, algae knit, folks that are really starting to kind of tackle some of the ways to pull algae as a material into consumer products as well. Books I am a big fan of, and I think like anybody and kind of who's interested in this, all of this broken nature stuff, right? So Paolo did an incredible job, her and her team, with the whole broken nature exhibit. I think it's jam-packed of inspiration and a lot of questions about, whether or not we'll ever be able to, as a species, figure out how to live alongside nature in a way that allows us to kind of profit together, or whether we'll kind of die trying, right? I mean, it's really powerful stuff. My other one I like is Drawdown. This is also a really good one, and I think it's a shout out too for me because it really calls out the amount of power that exists in investing in women's health and women's education.
True.
Because those two are two of the biggest impacts on some of some of the sustainability stuff. I mean, and so that ties really well into kind of Lia's mission, into the mission of the product. But it's really powerful. The idea of women's health, women's education, investing in it in developing countries, recognizing that we're at a point in society where there are more women entrepreneurs, women engineers, women designers, and the ability to kind of design products that really meet our unmet needs is really powerful. So those are probably my two books. There's I think a great documentary on fungi that's out there, and See, I think
See
there's
Spears.
yes, that's the name of it. So I mean, there's some really powerful stuff out there right now for sure.
Yeah, it's amazing. The choices are starting to become a little bit unlimited, which is fantastic. Going back to that
Hmm.
point about just making it a normal part of conversation. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, Bethany, thank you so much for your time today. This was a fascinating conversation. For anyone who wants to learn more about the specifics of the pregnancy test made by Lia Diagnostics, or if they actually want to purchase some tests themselves, where's the best place to go?
Yep, meetleah.com is the best place to go. We've got the social accounts up as well, but the website is where you can purchase, where you can connect with us. Absolutely. So meetleah.com.
Awesome. And that's meetlia.com. So thank you very much, Bethany. This is for everyone listening, we have Bethany Edwards from Lia Diagnostics joining us to talk about the first flushable and biodegradable pregnancy test. So, Bethany, thank you very much for the work you're
Thank
doing.
you.
This was a fascinating conversation. And
Yes, thank you so much,
all the
Daniel.
best.
I am a huge fan, and thank you again for amplifying the voices of those folks working in sustainability.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. Take care.
Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.